ابتغاء ثوابه وقربه. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا اله الا الله والله اكبر ولا حول ولا قوه الا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله والحمد سبحان الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد السالم الفجر المعلم الى طالنا وعلى اله وصحبه نور عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه زينة عرشه وذلك كلمات عدد كل حرف يكتب ويكتب ويقرأ ويقرأ السنة ويسمع وبئه ويرى الأرضين له. قال مؤلف رحمه الله تعالى فعن الله تعالى مؤلف الدارين رضي عنه. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, continuing with our lesson from yesterday, where Habib spoke about the concept of advising the students that when they go back to their countries, he said, we do not want you to speak with your own tongue. We want you to speak on the tongues of those who have continued to carry this responsibility and this inheritance, the spiritual inheritance, the academic inheritance, and the da'wah inheritance, the three objectives. And this is the concept, in Arabic it is called al-niyaba. Al-niyaba means to make someone your deputy. In today's terms, you'll say like ambassadors. So when you deal with an ambassador, right, how do you deal with an ambassador? You deal with him according to the country that he represents. You don't deal with him as a person. So a person could be the ambassador, for example, of a certain country today, and he'll be treated with the best of etiquette and respect in terms of modern government protocols. In the next year, he could have been disposed of his duty. Someone else's ambassador, will they treat him now with the same etiquette and the same protocols? No, because he's no longer now a deputy of that particular. So when a person takes up the responsibility of da'wah, when a person aligns themselves with the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest need is to learn the duties of a deputy. What does it mean to represent what we are representing? And ultimately, what does it mean to represent the Prophet ﷺ in our knowledge and our spiritual purification, in our da'wah, and then ultimately in everything that we do? Habib will expand a little bit more on this concept. وقال رضي الله تعالى عنه حياكم الله ما الأخبار عندكم. So obviously this was another gathering with some students, and initially, as we mentioned, this book was a collection of talks or recordings of gatherings that Habib Umar had with the initial students of Dar Mustafa. And generally, we would find that this was the time of ta'sis, of foundational building. A lot of what Habib Umar said in the beginning was foundational, in that he was establishing the qawaid, or the rules upon which the da'wah would be placed in this particular day and age. And this is the nature of revivers. Nature of revivers is that they don't bring anything new, but they revolutionize the way we approach things that we've always been doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses them even with different forms of techniques and different ways to help the students deal with the challenges of their times. حياكم الله ما الأخبار عندكم. Greets them and he says, how are you all doing? وكيف المناطق التي أنتم فيها, and how are your localities or your countries that you are residing in? Okay, this might have been students that have been visiting, came for the Dora, for example, or that were now about to leave, and asking about. So many times, even Habib Umar, when he speaks to students, he will ask, how's your country? Right? And obviously not how's your country in terms of anything else besides how's the situation of da'wah in your particular country. How is the situation of Muslims? How is the situation of people's iman? Their only concern is for people's hearts and their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْطِقُكُمُ الْقَوْلِ وَالْعَمَلِ, and how is your speech, right? Speech has two aspects. There is, so mantiq comes from the word nataqa, means something that you do with your tongue, but there's also the speech of your actions. Actions speak louder than words. So it's asking you, how is your speech and how is your actions? وَمَجَالُ اسْتِشْعَارِ النِّيَابَةِ عِنْدَكُمْ لِلذَّوْقِ وَالتَّرْجُمَةِ, and how are you in bringing to mind, or in this field that we spoke about, this field of deputization, how are you in bringing this feeling that you are the deputy of the Prophet ﷺ, both in spiritual tasting and in translation, meaning in your actions and in your spiritual states? What level have you reached to bring into mind that you are indeed a deputy of the Prophet ﷺ? And he explains, and he says, أَمَّا اسْتِشْعَارُهُ بِالذَّوْقِ يُنْهِي وَيُبَاعِدْ عِلَلَ الْقَلْبِ. So one brings to mind this deputization, that you are indeed only fulfilling the job that the Prophet ﷺ was sent with, and you represent him, and in turn you represent all of the inheritors in the chain of narrations, meaning you're representing Islam at the end of the day. Because when Muslims do something wrong, do they blame that particular Muslim or do they blame Islam? And if they blame Islam, then who are they blaming? The Prophet ﷺ, and ultimately. And so our actions will determine how people relate to the Prophet ﷺ. Meaning through us as Muslims, we either bring people closer to Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, or we can turn them off. And how dangerous would it be that a person turned away from Allah and His Messenger because of your actions or because of something you did or said? So as for bringing to mind and having this presence of heart in mind that I am a deputy of the Prophet ﷺ and all of my teachers, when one has this feeling spiritually, meaning experientially through spiritual tasting, and this will remove the diseases of the heart. And if you have this feeling and this bringing to heart in mind that you are the deputy of the Prophet ﷺ, meaning translated into your actions, this will remove the diseases or the deficiencies in actions. So there are deficiencies of the heart, or the ilal. Ilal means sickness. So the sicknesses of the heart, we know what they are. This is what Imam Ghazali speaks about in his Ihya, and also in his Bidayat al-Hidayah, whether it's hatred, pride, hatred, anger, malice, jealousy, and these sort of things. And the deficiencies in actions are what is not being consistent. So you start something, one day you don't do it. Like one day we read Quran, one day we don't read Quran. This feeling of laziness coming in all the time, wanting to find rest, and always looking for a way out. A person decides, okay, you know what, I should fast Mondays and Thursdays, so he does it 1 week, and then the next week he doesn't actually. So these are deficiencies in action, in the actions that we do, in everything, whether it is charity, whether it is fasting, whether it is our salah, our interactions, keeping up family relations in our businesses, right? All of these are the translation of our deeds. So Habib is saying, if you have this bringing to mind that you are the deputy of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the importance of the Sunnah, right? Why does a person need to follow the Sunnah? Why is this great emphasis on the Sunnah, right? That when you eat how the Prophet ﷺ ate. When you drink how the Prophet ﷺ. Many of us now, because and you might be brought up in a home in which the Sunnah is established, right? And so we'll tell our children, eat with your right hand. And you tell your child, enter the toilet with your left foot. Read this dua when you enter the toilet. But there's a difference if you tell a child, eat with your right hand, and you tell a child, eat with your right hand. This is the Sunnah of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One is just teaching the child a habit, and he might or might not know that that's his Sunnah. And many of us might have been brought up in this way. You eat with your right hand, you're doing everything which is Sunnah, but you were never connected to Sahib Sunnah. You are never connected and reminded that the reason why we're doing this is because of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sleep on your right hand side. This is the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Read these du'as before you sleep. This is the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the whole purpose of that is to take a person through the darajat. So, for example, a person who would like to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a vision, right? How can that happen if you are not with the Prophet ﷺ every day? So if you are leaving your house and you leave with your left foot, you read the dua, Bismillah, tawakkaltu ala Allah, la hawla la quwwata illa billah, bringing to mind the particular hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said, this is what you read when you leave your house. Meaning you are leaving your house now, and you're bringing to mind how the Prophet ﷺ left his house. When you meet someone and you greet them, and you bring to mind the Prophet ﷺ, the one who greets with more cheerfulness gets more rewards. 100 rewards descend on 2 Muslim people when they greet. 90 for the one who is more cheerful in the face of his brother. The one who greets first is the one without pride. When you go to your work, right, you bring to mind the Prophet spoke about the one who is striving to earn a halal rizq for his family. He's also in in a form of jihad, right? At the time of eating. In everything that you do. So for example, you're sitting at someone's house and it's time to eat. And they haven't gotten up to wash their hands, or they haven't brought in water to wash your hands. Now this is the tarjuma. This is the translation of your niyaba, of your deputization of the Prophet ﷺ, in that will you just go with the flow, or is this the essential foundation? But you know what? I need to wash my hands. It's the sunnah of the Prophet to wash hands. And by me doing it, I'll even remind, it will be a reminder for everyone, right? Or do we just go with the flow? This is the difference between those who are able to translate that into their lives and actions, right? And in everything, from the time, even in your relationship with your spouse, with your children, with what happens if you bring to mind that this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then you are living with him. And when you are living with him, then it is not far-fetched that you will see him in visions. One of the students came to the Shaykh and told him, it's been so many months or so many years that we are now on the spiritual path, and I haven't seen the Prophet ﷺ in my dreams. So the Shaykh tells him, okay, come, tonight you come and stay with me at my house. And so the Shaykh tells him, but now you have to listen to everything that I say. And so the Shaykh gives him a nice meal for dinner or for supper, and fish. And what does fish do? Fish makes you thirsty. So he gives him fish, but he doesn't give him water to drink, right? And then he tells the student to go sleep, right? And then he tells the servant to bring in a glass of water and put it on his bedside. But he tells the student, yes, your mujahada for tonight is not to drink that water, right? And so he's beginning to get thirsty, but he knows he's not supposed to touch the water. He's trying to fall asleep, right? And every time he wakes up, he looks at the water and his mind, fighting with him, should I take the water, right? And he spends the whole night in this wrestle or in this battle with himself because he's thirsty. So in the morning, after the Fajr Salah, the Shaykh asks him, did you see any dream last night? He said, yes. He said, what did you say? He said, I saw myself in the desert and I was extremely thirsty and there was this huge glass of water and I was trying to reach it. His entire dream was about what? Was about water. Why? Is because that's what he was thirsty for and that he was needing. And so likewise, if we are thirsty for the Prophet ﷺ, right, then most definitely. And so the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would find it strange that someone claims to love the Prophet ﷺ and follow him and you don't have any interaction. We are not saying that seeing the Prophet ﷺ in visions is in and of itself something which is a proof of a person's piety or non-piety. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many people will be on the utmost sunnah and the most etiquette with the Prophet ﷺ, right? And they might not see. These are the spiritual gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that might then bring pride into that person. By not giving him that makes him even yearn more and more into more actions. And sometimes when a person sees a vision or he has some spiritual experience, what will happen? They can become complacent and think, oh, I've reached a level now, right? And it's never the goal. It's never ever the goal. The goal is always to, because even if a person does see some spiritual experience or vision or whatever, doesn't mean you have to stop reading tahajjud tomorrow or stop doing your adhkar or stop treating your parents with respect. Your duties don't stop, right? So the spiritual experiences are not connected at all to your responsibilities. They either form as a way of giving you impetus and sort of tapping you on your back along the way to say, you know what, you're on the right way, right? Or they can become a distraction. And so many times even the people on the path would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to open up to them anything, right? If it means that they are going to be, it means they're going to be distraction. But the true people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously there's different levels in which they connect with the Prophet ﷺ, his spiritual experiences. And seeing him only increases them in their yearning for him, right? And so if they were thirsty before seeing him, after seeing him, they are even more thirsty, right? Because there's no limit to these relationships that people have, because the Prophet ﷺ himself in every instant is increasing in his closeness and proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the person as well is in every instant increasing if we are on this continuum. And therefore, you'll always hear from our Shaykh, especially in month of Rabi al-Awwal, Habib Ali Mashhur would tell the students, he would say, in the past, in Tareem, every night, they would, the nature of the city and families, every night, when they would wake up in the morning, what did you see? What did the Prophet tell you last night? Right? This was something that was common. To such an extent that they would say, when you see him the night before, you see him according to your spiritual. Everyone sees the Prophet ﷺ according to their own spiritual state, not according to his spiritual state. No one can bear to see the Prophet ﷺ in his true spiritual state. So according to your spiritual state, you'll see. And if you see him the next day, he's more beautiful than before. And if you see him the day after, he's more beautiful than before. And it continues like this. Because the more you purify yourself, the more the heart of your mirror is able to reflect of that beauty. And Habib Ali al-Habashi would say that there was nothing more, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation, he did not create anything more beautiful than the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that face is ingrained in the heart of every single human being. And what the Sunnah does and what salutation on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam does merely lifts that veil. So no one can say that I don't love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not connected. He's connected. If you are a human being and you've come after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are connected to him, whether you like it or not. Right? And the disbelievers, right, because they refuse to accept him, that veil will always remain. For believers, there is the rust on the heart, but that image of the face of the Prophet is in the heart of every single believer. Now, Shaykh would say, what if a person is constant in the whole purpose of the Sunnah and reminding one is to remove that rust, so that that image can start being imprinted more and more. And the salutation that we send in everything that we do when we study his life is only so that that imprint that is in our hearts now manifests itself. And this is a very powerful paradigm, right, to operate from. In saying that I'm not connected to the Prophet ﷺ, he is, know that the Prophet ﷺ resides within you, right? One of the interpretations of the verse is fikum, he is in you, right? And he wants you to become acquainted with him, right? And he actually knows you more than you know him, right? And he's more anxious, right? Harisun alaykum. The verse of the Quran says that he's ardently anxious for you, right? Meaning everything. Imagine if you have a child and the child comes back from school, someone fought with him. How do you feel as a parent, right? So all of your worries and your troubles and your griefs, it affects the Prophet ﷺ more than it even affects your spouse and your parents, right? And so we have to imagine this imprint of the Prophet ﷺ in our hearts that wants to manifest itself, but we are the ones that are preventing it. And therefore they would say the only veil between a person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the only veil between a person and the Prophet ﷺ is your own self, your own ego, your own choosing other than his way in everything that you do. So this deputization has two facets. One is through spiritual experience or experiential tasting, and one is through translation into actions. ولولا الفوائد الكبرى في أمر الارتباط بالنيابة الذوق والعمل والمترجم عنه بما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بلغوا عني ولو آية لما دعينا إليه. And were it not for the greatest benefits, right, in being connected to this or becoming deputies of the Prophet in spiritual experiences and in the translation of our actions, right, which the Prophet himself taught us. So this concept that Habib is speaking about is something that he's bringing up from his own. The Prophet taught it to us. And how did he say? بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey from me even if it is just one verse, right? And if it were not for this Prophet calling us and teaching us how to be his deputies, لَمَا دُعِينَ إِلَيْهِ, we would not have been called towards it. So people translate their understanding and their relationship to this hadith of the Prophet بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, right? Differently. بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي, the Prophet said, convey from me, right? And therefore, if a person merely, for example, and you find this with many of the mashayikh, so some mashayikh would, when they teach or they give talks and lectures, they would speak to people normally, right? And encourage people using the basis of the Quran and the Hadith. And some would only speak verses of the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet or speak life stories. They won't even mention anything. Brothers, we have become so lazy and we must do this and we must do that, right? If the Prophet said it, then I merely convey it to the people. And another way to connect with the Prophet, right, is through his ahadith and through this teaching that now. We all understand the barakah that lies in the Quran. Just by merely reciting the Quran, one's heart is illuminated, one's mind is illuminated, one receives shifa, one receives the aqwal and the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ have that same nur and the same light, right? And just as you would read Quran, some of the pious would have a wird of reading the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Because when you read the words which he spoke, his ahadith as well have spiritual states contained within them. So when the Prophet is speaking about the solution for a certain spiritual disease, by merely reading that, you are connecting yourself to him, right? And those lights that are contained in those words then descend into the heart. And this is why the Riyadh al-Salihin, right, would be a common book that was read in the houses of the pious. It was the Quran and the Riyadh al-Salihin, and the Quran and the Jalā'il al-Khayrat. These were the two things that never left the home of any, even in the souk, the businessman. Every single shop had the Quran and the Jalā'il al-Khayrat. Those that wouldn't be able to read, for example, the Riyadh al-Salihin, the Jalā'il al-Khayrat, or any form of prescription or salutations on the Prophet. If the customers came, he dealt with the customers. As soon as the customers left, they opened up. You see this now in Ramadan. Generally, people have this impetus in Ramadan. So when you go to work, they keep the Quran on the side. But that was the practice of the people of Allah throughout their lives. Right? لذا أي وقت تريد أن تبلغ يكون لك حبل موصل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And for this reason, any time that which you desire, if you want to connect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how do you connect to him? Convey. Because he said, "Ballighu anni," convey from, right? How do we connect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Convey his message. And as we mentioned yesterday, that da'wah and calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest and the quickest way to reach the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We explained about this yesterday about how if you do his work, he then is going to take. He's going to take care of you, or you will win his favor if you are doing the work that he was sent with. يكون لك حبل الموصل من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وباب يدخلك عليه. And this is a door which you can use to enter yourself into his presence and to present yourself to him, to do the work that he was sent with. فتبلغ بلاغا صحيحا عنه. And then you convey the message from him, but in the correct way, in the way that he desired for you to convey, not according to your own hawa, your own caprice, or your own understandings and your own ego. But you have to learn how did the Prophet convey message. This is what is known as the fiqh of da'wah. And the fiqh of, so we have the fiqh of science of fiqh, which is jurisprudence and the ahkam. Then you have the fiqh al-batin. The fiqh al-batin is the science of the purification of the heart. And then there's the fiqh al-da'wah. How the understanding of how to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our mashayikh would say that when we study fiqh, which is of the ahkam, and anyone that's read any book in fiqh, you know, they have the matan, which is the texts, and then there's the commentary, and then there's the hashiyah, right? The marginal notes on the commentary. And sometimes a student can spend up to days to a week just trying to understand a few words. This particular pronoun, what is it referring to, right? What did the author intend by this particular, right? So the commentators would commentate on the text, the original text, what is intended by it. And in the marginal notes, those commentators will mention, you know, these are the different, perhaps, interpretations, and there is everyone's trying to unravel what's within the text, right? Because when the scholars of the past wrote their mutun, the original text, they compressed within it so much. And the whole purpose of a student going through this mutun and memorizing this, because the ru'usul masail, everything that you need to know about that particular topic lies within the text. And the more proficient you are, the more from those few words you are able to extract all the other masail that are ancillary to that. So, in understanding the fiqh and the ahkam of how to read salah and fasting and all this, a student will spend many, many times trying to understand these texts. And they say, if we're spending sometimes 2 to 3 days on a few lines, like in fiqh, are we not ought to be spending more time on the fiqh of the batin? So the books of Imam Ghazali, do we just peruse through it, right? They say, Mururul Kiram, you're just passing by, or we try to study it and understand these diseases of the heart, and where am I, and how do I actually combat it? And what strategies do you have in today's modern times to actually purify your heart? And likewise, the fiqh of da'wah. Da'wah also is not just getting up and going and whatever comes to your mind. Da'wah actually requires a lot of thought and a lot of strategy. You have a certain person that you would like to bring him back to salah, for example. You can't just go, hey brother, you're not reading salah. What strategy? Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein teach us. right? When they saw that old man making wudu incorrectly, did they go and speak to him? And even if they went and spoke to him, right, they were the grandsons of the Prophet ﷺ, right? He would have respected them, but they understood the fiqh of da'wah, obviously, because they brought up in the house of Sahib al-Da'wah. So they decided to go and tell him, we are arguing. One is, he says his wudu is better, and I'm saying my wudu is better. Can you judge between us, right? What they had to actually strategize before they went to, right? And was it something that just happened by the way? No, they had to sit and think, right? And this discussion of how, and this is how it's in Abu Bakr and Prophet also spend their nights. They would spend their nights concerned over the affairs of the Ummah. So just to express how far away we are from this. One of the problems in our societies is even as Muslim communities, we are just going with the flow, right? So let's take Fajr Salah, for example, which we know is an imperative with regards to every believer, right? But if you know you have a neighbor or you have friends or you have family that are not performing Fajr Salah, and it's been a year, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years, as a da'i, as someone who's concerned about the message of Prophet, right? What strategies have you thought about to bring people back to Salah? Salah is one thing. We know people that are not even speaking to their parents, right? We know people that there's problems between them and their spouses or their children, right? People that are involved in business transactions, which are not actually halal according to the Islamic Sharia. What are we doing? We might feel bad about it and let it go back. Have we actually sat and discussed with someone else out of concern for this person? And this is why the Prophet also in the Quran, Allah says, when a spouse disagree, and the instruction in the Quran was that if they disagree, then get an arbitrator from her side and an arbitrator from his side, and let them discuss between them. If they desire islah, if they desire to be reconciled, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reconcile with them. Sayyidina Umar, when he would send people to sort of arbitrate, so there's an arbiter from his side and an arbiter from her side, and they would come together. If the person that Sayyidina Umar sent to judge between them and to help them came back and said, no, you know what, it didn't work out, he'd beat that person. And he says, you the problem, not them. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if they desire reconciliation, he will be, meaning that the method that you used wasn't amicable, right? The strategies weren't in place, right? And understanding, and in this regard also understanding human nature, and that the nafs doesn't like to be told what to do. No one likes to be told what to do, right? Even your own children, your own self, you don't like to be told what to do. And the whole purpose of da'wah is to allow people to think that what they are doing is from themselves. But we want to have credit for everything. You know, he wasn't reading Salah, and because of me now there's no benefit. That's not niyaba. That's not niyaba. That's ego now, right? And there's also a form of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you give charity, then do not, لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. Do not nullify your charity بالمن والأذى. Man means you keep reminding someone. Remember I gave you that, remember you're in need and I gave you that. Sometimes we even joke about it. You know, sometimes people, because of the favors we do to them. بالمن والأذى, and harm people. Right? لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. And likewise, by analogy, we should not nullify our da'wah, right, by wanting to be known that we are the ones who actually guided people over the course of actually bringing. Are we willing to do the da'wah behind the scenes without your name even being mentioned? But because your intention is to correct that person's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وباب يدخلك عليه فتبلغ بلاغا صحيحا. And وإن جئت معك عقل أو فكر أو نفس فهذه ليست بأبواب تدخلك عليه. So if you come and you approach the da'wah with your own intellect or your own thoughts and your own ego, فهذه ليست بأبواب تدخلك عليه. These are not doors that are going to enter you into the prophetic presence or connect you to the prophetic personality to do the job the way you ought to be doing it. وَلَيْسَ بِأَبْوَابٍ تُوصِلُكَ إِلَيْهِ. And these doors will never actually take you towards the Prophet. So what Habib was saying, if you do da'wah, this is the greatest door through which you can reach the Prophet. But if you do it the correct way. If you come with your own thoughts, your own ego, your own ideas and understanding, you think I am now, you know, fikr, I am, it's my intellect, right? Then you're not. These doors would actually take you further away from the Prophet. إذا انقطعت النيابة حلت العلل في القلب والعلل. And so if this deputization is lost, this is when the diseases enter the heart, and this is when diseases enter into a person's actions. فلهذا كان من نعمة الله تعالى الارتباط بالسند وربط الحبال. For this reason, one of the greatest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is His extending of these ropes, right, and these chains. How are we going to learn this prophetic way of doing da'wah, of living? We have to take it from the spiritual inheritors, right, or the inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ. And so there is an ijazah and there is a sanad. And why would people go and sit with the mashayikh to learn? We spoke about the chains of knowledge because we want the interpretation which the Prophet ﷺ himself taught us with regards to the ayat of Quran. And in the same way, we want to learn the method that the Prophet ﷺ taught those Sahaba, and especially in his household. Because the prophetic household, the Ahl Bayt, their maziyah or their distinguishment is they were brought up in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And so the way you yourself would know that there's things you do in your house which is particular for yourself, or the way you would like to bring up your children, or the way your parents brought you up. So for example, if you were living in a home and it was the practice of your parents every day before dinner that you would have a family discussion or read some biographies of the pious or read some ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, because that now we all know we have to be reading the Quran, right? The Sharia doesn't stipulate which time exactly, but in your family this was the time, before dinner or after dinner. So you're going to now bring your children up. You're going to be bringing your children up in the same way, because experientially that's what you went through. Not just that, but the way you eat, the way you drink, right? The way you slept, the du'as you read, right? When you went to sleep, the different things which happened in your house, which connected you to Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, you would implement those strategies because they work for you. So what about the household of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And if they were brought up in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, they would, the way that they did things all have a prophetic touch. This is one of the distinguishments of the city of Tarim as well. We always give this example because you don't find this in the books. The Sunnah teaches you certain things, but its implementation, right? You can see how they brought it into Tarbiyah, how they brought it into bringing up an entire society that will live according to its Sunnah. So when a child is born, it's we always speak about this example. The child is breastfed when it's hungry, right? The child cries and the mother knows what to say. Every 2 hours or 3 hours you feed the child. But in Tarim, it was the practice. And where did they get this practice from, right? That they would ensure that one of those feeds is 1 hour before Fajr. Even if it meant the child went hungry a little bit later at night, or a few hours before, but feeding 1 hour before Fajr. And ensure that he's awake, so that his biological clock knows this is not a time for sleep, because of the importance of tahajjud, right? You're not going to find it in the book. And it's not also obligatory, right? But this is how you connect people to the Prophet. This is through dhawq, right? And someone might tell you, oh, you're keeping the child hungry, right? Because now they're coming with their own understanding, their own intellect. They don't realize the goal. The importance of tahajjud has to start while the baby is still in the mother's womb, right? You still are in the cradle, not otherwise 20 years of your life you never had read tahajjud, and now you want to. So there's an inertia of laziness now. And ask people who haven't read tahajjud, and suddenly you start making it. And then you realize it's not just tahajjud, it's to stay awake after Fajr till Ishraq. And this is one of the most difficult, right? So that's the time they would allow the kids to go out and play, right? They would build the houses with the house, this little courtyard, and they let them play outside during that time, right? And then after Ishraq, they want to sleep, it's fine. Some of them to the extent that they would bring their children up. If the kids had reached like 3-4 years older, now they're not waking up, and it's not obligatory for them to wake up for Fajr, but they would merely wake them up and give them water to drink. Say Bismillah, say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, say Bismillah before you drink, just to break their sleep. They don't get used to sleeping the entire night without, right? This is all the importance of tahajjud. And a mother or a father who is doing this for their children, right? Imagine, this is a strategy in their mind. They have a long-term strategy. I want my child to be a person of tahajjud, right? And they know it has to start here. The way they would enter, they would teach them never to enter the bathroom or the toilets in a state of nakedness. And this is the sunnah as well. Never to even shower in a state of complete nakedness. Right? To teach them that that haya that one has to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To such an extent that they would even teach them intentions. They would say that they would teach their children intentions like they would teach them Surah Fatiha. Before you eat, what are the intentions you are eating? Right? Before you drink, before you do. To such an extent, they give the story of once a family was sitting and they heard loud noise outside, and as is natural with all children, when they hear a commotion, what do? You want to get up and look out the window and see. And they would stop the child. But what intention are you getting up to see? Is it just fudul? Is it just inquisitiveness? Or do you have the intention that if there's someone in need, right? And when we say intentions, what do we mean by intentions? We mean connecting you to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Like in everything, to even to such an extent that they would want to even think the way the Prophet said. Right? And if you are the Prophet in your thoughts every day, then that will translate into your action, and that will translate into even your spiritual states. So the greatest blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to be connected to these chains, where we learn how to be with the Prophet in our thoughts, in our minds, in our hearts. So now when you give the message and you convey the message, you have a connection. And this was the whole purpose of the ijazah, right? A person who just studies to read from books and he goes and teaches people, he's not connected to the Prophet because he hasn't aligned himself in that spiritual chain, where the light of the Prophet travels through the circles of knowledge from teacher to teacher, right? فيبلغ المبلغ ومعه رابطة ومعه باب ومعه حبل فيستشعر هذه النعم. So when you are conveying now on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ, you have a connection, you have a door and you have a rope, and you are then able to bring to mind that I am only a deputy, it is not me. This is the responsibility. And we mentioned also that when this duty is then performed, it's not out of pride and arrogance, but it's because of an enormity of responsibility that has been placed on your shoulders. If you don't do it, then you are in trouble. Right? Not because a person wants any name or fame, but just because we know the Prophet ﷺ and the care and concern he has for his ummah, and the condition of the ummah to be that if I don't do this, what's going to happen to the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the greatest intentions for doing dawah is to bring gladness to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Now Habib is going to explain when he mentioned earlier, and he said, when we have this feeling of being the deputy of the Prophet ﷺ experientially, right, through spiritual tasting, it gets rid of the diseases of the heart. And one of those diseases of the heart, and so he is purified of what? Of conceit and being deceived. I am the one that's doing it, or I am the one that's having the effect. You go, you give a talk in a certain place, or you call people and they are affected, right, and they start crying and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did you have anything to do with it? Of course not. Right? And if that's the way you actually think, right, then very soon that effect will no longer start being there. And they would teach the students that if you are not crying for the people at night in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then don't bother going and calling them during the day. Why? Because if you're not doing that, you're not understanding how the da'wah works. Allah is the one that guides people's hearts, and we are only just a means, right? And people that would, and sometimes we'd see this many times, a person would be asked, or the mashayikh, they would ask them to go and visit someone or speak to someone, and they'll say, okay, and they'll delay, and then they'll say, okay, and then they'll delay, right? And maybe after a week or 2 weeks only they'll actually go. But you know that they've been actually knocking on Allah's door all the time, waiting for an ijabah. And when they receive the ijabah, then they go, because now they know it's a done job. Because they did the hard work, now it's easy to actually go and speak to the people. And when a person makes dua, they know when Allah has accepted their dua for a person. And a person doesn't need, we don't want to see results even in our lifetime, right? But the whole purpose, what did the Prophet do every night? He was knocking on Allah's door for the entire ummah. Now, and so this will be, he will not have conceit, and he will not have pride when he is calling people. This is also one of the, so the Habib gives a story of one of the people that were connected to, or they became connected to some of the mashayikh, right? And this person now, when he went back, he was a normal scholar, a normal teacher and preacher. And he had a few students. But now he connected himself to one of these mashayikh who were perfect examples of the prophetic inheritance. And due to this connection now, right, When he went back to his country and started doing da'wah and speaking to people, what happened? He started having an effect on the people. In the masjid, for his Jum'ah might have been only maybe, 10 or 15 safs. After this, the masjid started overflowing into the streets to such an extent that now even when he leaves the Jum'ah masjid, he can't even get into his car because the crowds all are gathering around him. They all come for his lessons and everything else. Right? And Habib says, and he begins to think now that this is because of his intellect and his oratory and whatever it is. So now he starts cutting his connection with his teacher, with his Shaykh. He stops doing the dhikr which he was supposed to do because he thinks now, I've reached where I'm supposed to have reached, right? And not a few months go by where not a single person starts coming to his lessons, right? His Jum'ah Salah goes even worse than what it used to be before. He walks in the street and no one even looks at him. And this is the hard lesson that sometimes, until he realizes that it's not me. It's not me doing the work. Right? It's not me. I don't have any barakah, I don't have any techniques, I don't have any strategies, I don't have any fasah and oratory. It's only because of this is Habib that he saw. When he realizes that and he goes and he apologizes, right, and he corrects his understanding and his relationship, then, but now even though there can be a million people, he knows, you know what, it's not me. And now so what? And so when he has now experientially knows that I'm only a deputy, he can never be deceived and think that, oh, you know what? So whether they teach to one person or whether they teach to a million people, it doesn't make a difference. Because they're not doing it for them. Why are they doing it? Because they want to connect to the Prophet. They're not worried about whether a million people come. And some of them, they wouldn't even be a single student. Right? But they were sent to a particular locality. No one even comes to the masjid, but they would continue to teach their lessons after Fajr as they would. Why? Is because who are they dealing with? Dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And perhaps Allah will send some creation, whether it's jinn or the angels, to listen. Right? But they're not concerned about the people and the effect that they have on people. They're concerned during da'wah is we want to be in the good books of the Prophet. And if there was a way to get there besides da'wah, then they would have taken that way, because dealing with people sometimes is complicated, right? But this is we're living in a time where da'wah is imperative. ويربو بقلبه عن أن يحسد أو يحقد أو يلتفت إلى الدنيا. So he doesn't have conceit, he's not deceived with himself, right? And his heart now is able to elevate itself against having hasad for anyone else. You see someone with something more than you. Obviously, we're not even talking about dunya terms here. You see someone at the highest spiritual state, or someone comes and he says, oh, you know what, his child saw the Prophet, we're not worried about that. Because we are not competing with one. We don't want to be better than. This is exactly what spiritual path is about. Is you desire for people more than you desire for yourself. And so when you have this experiential tasting of being the deputy of the Prophet, then you cannot have hasad for anyone or hatred in your heart for everyone, or turning towards anything of the dunya. Right? Wanting status or wanting fame or even wanting wealth. And these are the tests that also a person is faced with. Right? Now people will come and they'll offer you money or they'll offer you different sorts of things. Right? Are you going to now turn towards it? And then you become of the ulama of dunya. Right? They are the ulama of the dunya and the ulama of the akhirah. They don't turn towards these things because they know it holds no weight. In comparison to what you are striving for, the dunya and whatever it contains doesn't have. And the Prophet ﷺ, he realigned our paradigms. Right? When he said the sunnah of Salat al-Fajr is more valuable in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the dunya and whatever it contains. We spoke the other day about the sins of the eyes is not just to look at what is haram for you to look at in terms of the opposite gender, but it is to even look at the dunya with the eye of veneration. Anything in this dunya which you look at with the eye of veneration, oh mashallah, house, it's a smart car, or look at that building, or look at this. This is the sin of the eye. Because the dunya is despicable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, one of the sins of the eyes is to look upon another human being with disdain. Think that you are actually better than you. And how does one fulfill the duty of da'wah in bringing people out of sin into obedience, or out of negligence into remembrance, right? Or out of the states they are into higher spiritual states without having a bad opinion about them or thinking that they are sinful. We'll speak about this in a little bit. ويستشعرها ويترجمها في حسن أعماله بما يصلحها وينقيها عن الخلل. And when he has this feeling and this presence of having mind that he has the deputy, and this is translated into his actions, then the deficiencies of those actions move away, right? And then the impetus, when his eyes open, it's no longer, oh, should I get up or shouldn't I get up? You are being now lifted, right? When salah times comes, no more you delay your salah to the last time. You now do it with a sense of purpose, because you understand that there's a goal that I'm reaching, and everything is being built. Your entire life, from the time you're born, from when you become Bārīh, everything that you do, it's a foundation that you are building on. So your salah, if you've been reading your salah all the time at its appointed times, then your foundation is solid. But you're on and off, there's nothing to build on. So the duties, the actions which we need to do, even though they are just externalities, but they are the foundation, right? And you cannot delve into those realities. Those inner realities will not have a place to reside if the building is not up. And therefore, you cannot do. Some people will say, "Oh, you know what? It's about presence of heart and mind. So I won't read all my sunnahs and whatever. I'll just do dhikr." But the sunnah of the Prophet teaches you what is important, right? So someone says, "Okay, you know what? Dhuhr salah comes, I'll only read 4 rakat, and then I'll do dhikr. I won't read in place of my sunnahs before and after. I'll do dhikr." That person hasn't understood what it means. What does niyabah mean? Okay, in his actions. Because what is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what the Prophet did. Not because what you think is best. And not even because what you feel. A person might say, "Okay, I feel more spiritually connected if I do a certain thing." But the sunnah of the Prophet is to do something else. Right? The sunnah takes preference. One of the pious people in Tarim, when she would make the takbirat al-ihram in salah, she would not make the takbirat al-ihram until she had the state of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the Kaaba would become, she'd have this vision of the Kaaba. And only when she had the vision of the Kaaba, then she'd do the takbirat al-ihram. And so when she would read, obviously the Shafi, the woman read in Jama'ah, and it is more encouraged for women in the Shafi madhab to read in Jama'ah, to such an extent that they would even say that the husband should read in Jama'ah with the wife at home and then go to the masjid, or read in the masjid and then come and read, so she gets the reward of Jama'ah. Or they would even call the neighbor to come and read if there wasn't anyone with them, because just of the reward of Jama'ah in the Sharia. Hanafi, obviously, they encourage women to read on their own. And there are opinions, obviously, which encourage women in the Hanafi madhab to read in Jama'ah as well. And so, first process.
The inner place to reside inside of you, so there must be someone.
ويربو بقلبه أن يحصل أو يحتاج من الدنيا ويستأشر ويترجم في حسن أعماله يصلحها وينقيها عن الخلق. So these deficiencies. So a person now, he goes for. So we know that the hadith of the Prophet also, which spoke about the importance of Jama'ah. So this is the way they would encourage even the woman to read their salah in Jama'ah. And the men would read. In the Shafi madhab, obviously, there is also another opinion that they would prefer. They would say, if you're going to go read salah in the masjid, but your wife is not going to get Jama'ah, then it's better for you to actually, you don't get that Jama'ah, but you make sure that your wife gets the Jama'ah. Why? Also just this understanding, because they know that the Prophet his entire life never read a single salah on his own. Right? Every single salah is not recorded in the entire tradition, history of the Prophet in his life, that he ever read a single salah on his own. And he would always. So we were talking about how a person is to push themselves from one level to another. You don't get lazy. So if you know there's something carrying you, okay, you know what, this is the sunnah of the Prophet in Jama'ah, then you don't get lazy. And if you remember the deputization, whom I represent, and can I now go and call people and I am actually deficient? And we spoke about how a person, the quickest way to rectify themselves is to call people towards that which you yourself want to improve in life. No one is perfect. Even one of the problems we make in society as well, especially with our leaders and our scholars, is we hold them to too high standards, right? We hold them to standards of perfection. So now when we see a mistake from them, what do? We cancel them out. Because we're expecting them to be perfect role models. And that's not the case, right? That's not the case. Our relationship with the ulama and the leaders is to understand that they are also human beings, right? And if it's expected that there will be mistakes that are made, then we have an understanding of how we need to deal with that with nasiha, right? And nasiha is always the best way. But today we just cancel people out. A person makes one mistake and they're afraid that they're going to be now eaten up, right? And this actually makes a lot of people now apprehensive to even want to take positions of leadership, even though they might be most apt for it. Why? Is because not everything that they wanted, but because there's a job responsibility that can be done, right? But this nasiha needs to be there as well. Nasiha also is from the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. And then Habib just repeats the same قاعدة باستشعار النيابة ذوقا تذهب علل القلوب وباستشعار النيابة ترجمة تذهب علل الأعمال. The same understanding when one brings to mind that realization in spiritual tasting, then the diseases of the heart are removed, and if he does this through translation in action, then the diseases of actions, right? Meaning the laziness, wanting to take things easy. So we're talking about the sunnah, one day you read sunnah, one day you don't read sunnah. And so this woman that would see the Kaaba, that's what we're talking about. So when she would do the takbir al-ihram, she would see the Kaaba in front of her, right? The spiritual vision that she had. But then she complained to the Shaykh, she said, no, you know what, when I read in Jama'ah, the Imam makes the takbir al-ihram, and it takes me a little while before the vision comes and I see the Kaaba. So I'm a bit delayed in my takbir al-ihram. So, and look at her, now she's concerned because why? That's her own spiritual experience. But the sunnah is what? The sunnah is not to delay the takbir al-ihram. Safat is salat, takbir al-ihram. The essence of salah is to catch the takbir al-ihram with the Imam. So the Shaykh taught her, and he aligns her understanding now, that to do the takbir al-ihram and not to see the Kaaba is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and is better for you than to see the Kaaba. Why? This is the sunnah of the Prophet. And also our approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not because of our own experiences, right? It is because of the sunnah. And therefore they would teach people that the only time spiritual states are in order is if the action are in accordance with the sunnah. And this is the way that we would judge between people, because then when you enter into the door of miracles, right? And this Shaykh, he flew in the air. And the Hindus and this was a big fitna in India at the time, where supernatural acts were being performed at the hands even of non-Muslims, right? So for example, they would say if someone walks on water or flies in the air, does it mean that now you've got to go and kiss the person's feet and all of a sudden? They would say, judge his actions according to the Sharia of the Prophet, right? And that is the only judge. Why? Is because for people to make claims of the unseen is extremely dangerous. And you can take people for a ride. If you start claiming tomorrow that, oh, you know what, I saw this, I saw that, and I've been told to tell you to do this and do that. That person has no way of judging whether what you're telling them is true or not. And it's only your trustability. And there are many, many charlatans in this regard, right? People that make a living, right, just using this is because there's no way for other people to know that what you're saying is true. And if you read the books on tasawwuf and you read the books on the states of the spiritual, masters in this net, it's very easy to be able to talk their talk. And maybe people think that you actually have some sort of, some sort of spiritual secret. But what's the only way you deal with these people? And all people is the sunnah. How, they say tatbiq, how in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet is their actions. And Habib will always give the example, because when it asks about, he says, look at this, their interaction with the sunnah, the interaction with the technological devices, and the interaction with women. If this is in accordance with the sunnah, then this person generally is to be regarded to be as a pious person. And then also to understand their interaction with money and wealth, right? Is it in accordance with the sunnah? Does the way the person deal and talk, right? If a person is not reading their sunnahs before and after of Dhuhr Salah, which we know is a sunnah, right? Or the Salatul Awwabin or Tahajjud, but he's flying in the air. Does it mean anything? Flying in the air means nothing at all. It means nothing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the ability for the birds flying there, right? That means nothing. Miracles and supernatural acts mean nothing with regards to your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He can give that to a believer and He can give that to a disbeliever as well, right? What is the only thing which determines your relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your ittiba of His beloved Prophet. And that is the whole thing of this niyabah, right? We want that niyabah of Prophet because that is the greatest door to which we will reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Habib goes on to explain some of the diseases of the a'mal. ومن كان ينوب عن حبال النيابة المتصل بالنبوة فليتق الله في ذوقه وبترجمته. And so whoever wants to, right, take on this responsibility and become this deputy of the Prophet ﷺ and be connected to this prophetic station, فليتق الله في ذوقه وترجمته. Then he has to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in translating those things in his experiences and in his and in his actions. وهو بذلك مهما صدق يتهيأ إلى شيء كبير. And according to his truthfulness, he will be preparing himself for greater things. وتتلاشى منه أوصاف الإهمال. And then even negligence will fade from him. والإغفال, and being negligent in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. والتكاسل, and laziness. وركون النفس, being happy with one's low spiritual state. Rukun al-nafs, meaning the first thing your nafs tells you to do, okay, you get up and I should do this. The sunnah is to do this, and you feel, okay, no, tomorrow. This is rukun al-nafs, right? فالنفس تركن إلى الراحة وإلى الدعة, right? Because the nafs and the ego leans towards wanting to rest and making claims. وإلى الالتفات إلى شهواتها وما إلى ذلك, and turning towards one's desire, the carnal desires. And the whole purpose of the mujahada was to kill the ego. And so if a person has this niyabah tarjumatan, right, and he translates it into his actions, and all of these things which usually prevent people from bringing their actions in accordance with the sunnah, the negligence, turning towards the nafs, giving the ego everything that it wants, this will all go away. Even in eating, one of the mujahadas of eating is not to eat to your fill. Right? Before, in the past, they would go through great lengths in mujahada. Just stop eating 2 or 3 morsels before you feel full. Bring to mind that I am implementing this. So in everything that we do, we should bring to mind this niyaba, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us and to make it easy for us to put into practice what has been said. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.